Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside.
Let's dive in.
Today, we are taking the scalpel to one of the most persistent myths out there in the modern business world, really commercially successful too.
Yeah, the concept of effortless influence.
Exactly.
And our source material for this, it's essentially a forensic analysis, a really deep dive guide that's all about dissecting and then meticulously rebuilding the architecture of Frank Kern's core influence methodology.
Right, that framework that got credited with some pretty astonishing financial results back in its heyday.
Absolutely huge numbers.
So the mission here today, it's not just to understand the framework. We want to trace the exact pivot point where these, compelling self-help concepts try to jump the tracks and become empirically grounded psychological principles.
And frankly, where they fail in that attempt.
Yeah, we're looking for the seam, right, where the magic trick actually happens.
We're really aiming to expose the profound methodological gaps and the logical fallacies that are kind of holding up the original architecture.
And the central question we're asking today, and this is the one we really want you, the listener, to hang on to throughout this whole deconstruction, is this. What if the promise of effortless influence isn't some verifiable psychological breakthrough at all?
Okay.
What if it's actually just a cleverly crafted illusion, something designed to sell you back your own authentic desires, but, at a premium price?
That's a pretty bold assertion.
It is, but our sources argue the whole architecture is built more on faith than on actual data.
Okay.
So let's unpack the seductive nature of this design. Let's start with the core psychological premise.
Right. So what gives this framework its almost irresistible pull. I think its ability to sort of bypass all the complex external stuff, market realities, and instead speak directly to this really deep, almost primal human need. The desire for success to just be an automatic thing, a natural consequence of just being your true self. Effortless, right?
Okay, let's break down the cornerstone concept then. The analytical guide calls it the dual identity theory. This seems to be the mechanism they use to diagnose the human condition and then offer the cure.
Yeah, it creates this really stark binary split. It's quite simple, really.
Right.
On one side, you've got the shell identity.
Okay, the shell. What's that?
That's the version of you that's built from external inputs, the social mask you wear, right? The professional persona that's dictated by what everyone else expects.
A cautious self, maybe? The one afraid of rejection or failure?
Exactly. It is, by the framework's definition, an inauthentic construction. It's not the real you.
And then on the other side, the Holy Grail.
That's the core identity. This is supposed to be the authentic self, your immutable essence, your deepest values, true motivations, all those hidden desires you might not even acknowledge.
Right. And the promise is basically that all the struggle and failure in your life, in your business, it all comes back to this shell identity, just suffocating the core.
It creates this beautiful, simple narrative, doesn't it? Your success isn't out there somewhere. It's trapped inside you, just waiting to be unleashed.
But the real hook, the thing that turns all this introspection into potential profit, that's the congruence hypothesis.
Yeah, this is the central claim. It's pretty audacious, actually.
Go on.
It claims that when the shell identity aligns perfectly with the core identity, so when you're living and communicating with 100% authenticity, as they define it,
Okay.
it generates something called subconscious resonance.
Subconscious resonance. That sounds potent.
It's the engine of the whole thing, according to the theory. It posits that people don't just, like what you're selling anymore.
No.
No, they are magnetically drawn to your pure, powerful signal of authenticity. You're not doing conscious, tiring persuasion anymore. You're simply attracting the right clients, the right opportunities, the right wealth, effortlessly.
Okay, wait. That sounds more like a philosophical statement than a business strategy. And hold on. If this is genuinely about effortless influence, doesn't the huge amount of effort required to achieve that 100% congruence? I mean, finding and defining this core identity, doesn't that completely contradict the whole effortless promise right from the start?
Yes. That is the essential paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we will absolutely drill into that required effort in the next section.
Okay.
But first, just for a moment, we have to accept the framework's claimed logic flow. It asserts this qualitative leap. You go from the normal world of persuasion into this, ethereal realm of pure attraction.
Right. It claims a transition from surface influence You know, the conscious tactical stuff we all recognize based on facts, logic, visible tactics.
The core influence, which is defined purely as unconscious attraction. Spooky stuff.
So the proposed pathway, it's like a chain of causation. Starts inside you, promises market domination outside.
Exactly. It begins with intense self-awareness. That leads to identity congruence.
Okay.
This congruence supposedly generates the subconscious resonance,
Right.
which in turn achieves the effortless influence.
Yeah.
And then finally that delivers the tangible business results, millions of dollars.
But that middle bit, the pivot, how does deep internal identity work suddenly, automatically, reliably translate into actual people making buying decisions en masse? There feels like a massive black box right in the middle of that pathway, and we're just told to trust the magic inside it.
And to understand why people do trust that black box, why it's so compelling, we actually have to look beyond the methodology itself for a second. We need to trace its theoretical lineage.
So you're saying these ideas, while they might be branded as new and revolutionary,
They're not really new at all. They are rooted in over a century of self-improvement philosophy. It's a sophisticated repackaging.
repackaging of historical ideas that already proved they could sell.
Precisely. When you look closely, the architecture connects right back to a whole series of movements that basically promise internal change could reshape your external reality.
Okay, like what? Give us the history lesson.
Well, start with a new thought movement. Back in the 19th century, figures like Phineas Quimby were pushing this core philosophy that the mind holds creative power. Mind creates reality.
Right, the power of positive thinking.
Yeah, the belief that visualization and positive thinking could literally alter your physical state, your financial state.
Yeah.
That's the direct ancestor of this congruence hypothesis.
Okay, so that's way back. What else?
Then jump forward a bit, you can clearly see the influence of the human potential movement, the 1960s, 70s.
Right, Maslow, Rogers,
Yeah.
self-actualization.
Exactly. Transformational psychology, focusing on becoming your best, most authentic self. The language Kern uses for the core identity, it feels lifted directly from that era.
Makes sense. Anything else?
And critically, there's a heavy draw from neurolinguistic programming, NLP.
NLP. That came out of the 70s too, didn't it? Modeling excellence.
That's the one. NLP focused on breaking down the successful patterns of exceptional people into techniques you could reproduce. Now, Kern's framework shifts the focus from external technique to internal state.
But the drive is similar. To find and replicate a successful pattern.
Absolutely rooted in NLP. That underlying drive is there.
And then more recently?
Well, in its most modern, recognizable form, this whole mechanism relies heavily on the mass popularization of the law of attraction, from the 2000s.
Like The Secret.
Exactly. The promise that your vibration or your resonance attracts commensurate wealth. It's just a slightly more mystical version of the congruence hypothesis, isn't it?
So what's fascinating here, as you said, is why this lineage, this type of thinking, is so perpetually effective as a sales tool.
I think it offers a kind of intellectual escapism.
How so?
It basically tells you, hey, you don't need to do the hard, messy, unpredictable work. Market research, competitive analysis, dealing with economic ups and downs.
Right, the external stuff.
Instead, you perform this intense, but ultimately quite gratifying internal introspection. Work that feels noble, personal.
And the promise is that external reality, business success, it'll just conform to you automatically.
That's the deal. It substitutes rigorous external methodology, which is measurable but difficult, with intense internal introspection, which feels good subjectively but is, well, untestable.
And for someone stressed out, an entrepreneur or marketer, the idea that just finding your authentic self is the key to millions.
It's a powerful, seductive hook, isn't it? I mean, who wouldn't prefer a 4-hour visualization session over cold calling 50 prospects?
Fair point. But the question remains, is that seductive quality a sign of profound psychological insight? Or is it just the sign of extremely good marketing?
Let's find out by looking at the price of admission. What does this effortless state actually cost?
Okay, so we've established that this core identity work, this congruence, it has to be done to supposedly trigger the effortless influence. Now, let's apply the scalpel. Let's look at the required input. Because if the output is truly effortless, the input must be, well, something else entirely, right?
Oh, absolutely. The source material is quite clear on this. To reach this magical state of congruence, you first have to expend massive front-loaded effort. It's just disguised as self-discovery.
Which completely strains the definition of effortless.
Totally. Let's look at the first big primary exercise required, the ideal day visualization.
Okay, visualization. Sounds simple enough.
But this isn't just like a quick motivational checklist.
Yeah.
It's a mandate. You have to do detailed, meticulous, relentless 4-hour scripting.
4 hours. Scripting what?
Your perfect average day. The day you intend to live, down to the minute detail. Sights, sounds, feelings, income, location, everything.
4 hours of writing a fantasy script about your future self with no limitations allowed. That's not meditation. That's serious cognitive effort.
It's an act of mental construction, requiring sustained focus. And you must do it without limitations, the idea being to create a new baseline reality in your mind.
It sounds like a psychological commitment device.
Exactly. It forces you to invest substantial time and mental energy before you even try to influence a single customer.
And once you've put in that 4 hours, you're way more invested in believing the rest of it works.
Exponentially more invested. And that's just the first part. The second major exercise is equally demanding, but it's applied externally, sort of. It's the Bob persona creation.
Ah, yes, Bob, the ideal customer avatar, standard marketing stuff.
Not quite. The Bob persona in this framework goes way beyond standard demographics. You're tasked with creating this composite customer profile that digs into their absolute deepest psychological drivers.
Like what?
Their hidden core identity struggles mirroring your own supposed journey. Their deepest desires, their secret fears. You're basically guessing at their subconscious.
So it's an act of profound, almost forensic assumption. You're not actually interviewing customers for this.
Not really, no. You're essentially writing their psychological biography based on your own internal model of what they should want or fear, rooted in your own internal alignment work.
It sounds like competitive fan fiction about your ideal customer.
That's not a bad way to put it, actually. And the supposed product of this alignment, your core identity magically intersecting with Bob's deepest fears and desires, is called core communication.
Okay.
And the theory holds that just by speaking from your aligned identity, you automatically target the customer's subconscious desires. That's what results in the magnetic, effortless attraction.
But I have to challenge this directly. How can a process that requires minimum 4 hours of detailed personal scripting, plus this deep, assumed psychological analysis of an imaginary customer, how can that possibly be labeled effortless in any honest functional sense? The effort is just moved somewhere else.
Well, that's the brilliance of the illusion, isn't it? The framework defines effortless very specifically. It means the absence of surface selling.
Meaning?
No more cold calls, no more hard closes, no more pushy tactics. But it demands monumental internal effort, the intense introspection, the visualization, the persona creation.
Which is then reframed as noble self-discovery or alignment work.
Exactly. The effort isn't eliminated. It's internalized, disguised, and even sanctified, made to feel important and profound.
Okay, this brings us to maybe the most critical failure point identified in the analysis, the evidential vacuum.
Yes. The proof, or lack thereof.
If the methodology demands such intense internal work, surely the results must be systematically proven, right? There must be data.
Well, no, not really. This framework stands almost entirely on anecdotal and self-reported evidence.
So what's the main evidence cited?
The primary evidence, the big one, is essentially one overwhelming case study, Frank Kern's own personal transformation.
His own story.
Yeah, during that specific 2005 to 2008 time frame. And that transformation is correlated with him generating, supposedly, a staggering $31 million in revenue.
Okay, but that's the classic anecdotal evidence trap, isn't it? We have an NIC1 case study.
Exactly. One charismatic individual operating in a very unique market at a very unique time.
One person's success story, no matter how dramatic, it just can't function as empirical proof for a universal psychological mechanism, especially not one claiming to redefine influence itself.
And the secondary evidence, it's really just an unsystematic collection of client success stories, testimonials, case studies.
Which are great for marketing and social proofs.
Superb for that. But they utterly fail to meet the basic standard requirements for validating a sound methodology.
And our source analysis explicitly points out the missing pieces, the things that disqualify this as an actual empirical system.
Right. There are no controlled studies. There's no peer review of the mechanism itself.
And maybe most importantly,
no systematic failure case documentation.
Explain that. Why is that so crucial?
Well, think about it. If you're testing a new airplane engine, right, and it works perfectly on the first test flight,
great,
but then it fails mysteriously on the second flight, you don't just ignore the failure, do you? You study it. You find out why. The system is flawed until you understand the failures.
But in this methodology,
The failures are never systematically studied or documented. They're just ignored. Or worse, they get attributed back to the user not doing the internal work properly.
which leads us neatly into the most damning logical failures identified in the critique, the falsifiability challenges.
Exactly. A theory that cannot, even in principle, be proven wrong. Well, it's not operating as science, is it? It's functioning as a system of faith.
And this framework seems like a textbook example of circular logic. Let's just run the scenario.
Okay. Practitioner implements the method, does the hours of visualization, maps their core identity, uses core communication.
Scenario A. The practitioner achieves massive influence, makes millions. What happens?
The method is hailed as proven successful. See? The congruence worked.
Okay. Scenario B. The practitioner implements the method perfectly, follows all the steps, and fails. No significant influence, no financial success. What's the answer from the framework then?
The answer is always inevitably attributed to insufficient congruence.
Meaning it's the user's fault.
Always. The practitioner failed to fully connect with their core identity. Or they didn't do the visualization meticulously enough. Their core communication wasn't pure.
So the method itself is completely self-sealing. It can never actually fail or be blamed.
Exactly. It can't be modified based on external data because the failure is always located internally within the practitioner.
Which creates this profitable cycle of self-blame, right? And likely leads to investing in more training, trying to achieve that impossible, unattainable 100% congruence.
Precisely. And this logical trap is held up by the second major failure: untestable constructs.
Meaning the core ideas themselves can't be measured.
Right. The core mechanism, the core identity, the resulting subconscious resonance, they lack any kind of operational definition.
How do you measure the purity of a core identity? What's the unit of measurement for subconscious resonance? Is it just a feeling?
And if it is tied to something measurable, like a conversion rate, then why do you even need the mystical identity concept layered on top? Just focus on optimizing conversions.
Because without clear, measurable criteria, the whole pathway just becomes philosophically shaky, doesn't it? You can't test what you can't measure.
You end up relying entirely on a subjective feeling of rightness or alignment to justify an objective outcome, like money in the bank.
And that reliance on subjective feeling leads straight to the third big problem: confirmation bias.
Absolutely. Once you've invested those 4 hours scripting your perfect day, maybe spent significant money on the training course itself, done all the deep introspection.
You're heavily invested. You want it to work.
Exactly. So you are inherently biased. You're going to selectively recall the successes that one customer who said, wow, it's like you read my mind.
And you conveniently ignore or rationalize away or just forget all the failures, the potential customers who scrolled right past your supposedly resonant core communication.
That's confirmation bias in action. The contrast with actual science is stark, isn't it?
Yeah. Science demands quantifiable metrics, standardized, repeatable protocols.
Whereas Kern's approach relies on subjective feeling, personality dependence, anecdotal validation.
This is exactly where the alluring fantasy of effortless success just slams headfirst into the cold, hard wall of empirical reality.
So the big question then becomes, if this structure is so logically flawed, so empirically unsound, why has it, or frameworks very much like it, dominated the self-help and business narrative for literally decades?
Yeah, that is the essential question, isn't it? And we have to acknowledge, I think, that the framework does contain elements that feel intuitively right. They resonate, ironically.
Absolutely. But the danger is that these plausible elements are strategically leveraged to sell us the illogical, the mystical elements.
Okay, so let's try and isolate the plausible elements first. What parts actually hold water?
Well, the analysis agrees that authenticity, acting in clear alignment with your publicly stated values, that does have a real-world measurable effect on trust, on engagement.
Sure. Values congruence, consistent relationship building. These are proven pillars of successful human interaction, successful business. That's just basic psychology, really.
But these solid, understandable concepts get completely overshadowed by the explicit mystical elements layered on top.
Like what? What's the mystical part?
Well, we're talking about the implied promise of essentially subconscious telepathy.
Right. The idea that your internal state of congruence can magically transmit influence across the marketplace directly into your ideal customer's subconscious desires, Bob Persona's brain.
Yeah. And there's the essentialist view of identity, this assumption that there's a fixed, perfect core inside you that once you unlock it, just guarantees effortless results.
Which kind of reduces all the complexity of human behavior, economic factors, market timing, down to just a single internal alignment issue.
Exactly. And the core failure, the missing link, it remains the same one we identified earlier. The framework simply fails to provide a clear, reliable, and importantly, testable causal pathway between your personal self-awareness and measurable market influence.
It's basically an analogy, a metaphor.
That gets repeatedly mistaken for a verifiable, reproducible mechanism.
And you pointed out earlier that this structure, this pattern, it has a long history of captivating people. This formula, personal testimony plus vague mechanics plus promised radical transformation. It's a template.
It really is. It's the common architecture of so many transformation programs. And you can see this pattern stretching back nearly 2 centuries.
Okay, remind us of the lineage again.
Well, our sources draw a clear line right back to the 1840s. Early New Thought figures.
Mind over matter pioneers.
Exactly. They were the original proponents of the mind's creative power to heal illness, to manifest wealth. The methodology was simple. Sustained, focused mental energy could overcome material reality. Very similar vibe.
Okay, then jump forward.
Jump forward to the 1970s, and you get things like EST Training, Werner Erhard's high-intensity transformational workshops.
Those were famous, or infamous maybe. High pressure, very emotional.
Designed to force instantaneous self-realization, radical life change. The mechanism, intense internal confrontation, which feels a lot like Kern's intensive core identity work, doesn't it? Aimed at that immediate transformative breakthrough.
And then, more recently, the obvious one.
Of course, the 2006 phenomenon, The Secret, which took the core concepts of visualization and attraction principles and just packaged them brilliantly for mass global consumption.
So, New Thought, EST, The Secret, they all share that central dogma.
Pretty much. External reality is just a direct reflection of your internal state. Fix the internal state, and you fix everything else automatically.
You know, it sounds like what these frameworks are truly offering, as Max Weber might have put it, is a kind of salvation of the self. But conveniently disguised as a business strategy or a path to health or whatever, they sell internal validation, certainty, which, let's face it, are often more valuable commodities than a proven business process, especially when things feel uncertain.
Absolutely. So, if the real goal is to achieve authentic influence that actually drives verifiable results, we have to replace this mystical architecture. We need superior, contemporary, empirically sound frameworks. What's the antidote?
Okay, this is where we pivot to solutions.
Yeah.
Because we can achieve the positive outcomes that the congruence framework hints at: authenticity, connection, maybe even rapid growth. But we have to use models built on rigor, not on faith.
So ditch the magic. Embrace the science.
Pretty much. Let's start with a scientifically verified replacement for the entire idea of core identity alignment. We can introduce self-determination theory, SDT, Deci and Ryan's work.
Okay, SDT. That's not self-help, right? That's proper psychology.
Exactly. It's a rigorously tested psychological model, and it focuses on universal human needs, things that actually drive us.
SDT identifies 3 fundamental needs, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If they're satisfied, they drive intrinsic motivation, human flourishing.
That's right. They are autonomy, our need for freedom, control, choice; competence, the need for mastery, effectiveness; and relatedness, the need for connection, belonging.
And the key difference is, these are immediately actionable and measurable, aren't they?
Totally. You don't need to spend 4 hours scripting your core identity to figure out that giving your customer more autonomy in their buying decision or showing you're genuinely competent in your field. These are reliable, testable drivers of influence.
Because they address the customer's actual motivational architecture, not some imagined subconscious resonance.
Exactly. And furthermore, instead of just guessing at the subconscious desires of your imaginary Bob persona,
We can turn to measurable, quantitative models,
okay?
like value-centered counseling approaches, maybe using something like Rokeach's work,
Yeah.
which uses empirically measurable values hierarchies.
Right. You can quantitatively assess what people actually prioritize. It moves the whole discussion away from esoteric identity discovery towards demonstrable data points about values.
Okay, so SDT for motivation, values hierarchies instead of core identity. What about replacing Bob, the imaginary customer?
For that, perhaps the most practical replacement is the jobs to be done JTBD framework, popularized by Clayton Christensen.
JTBD, that forces you to shift your perspective entirely, doesn't it?
Completely. The classic example everyone uses. Customers don't just buy a 1/4-inch drill bit. They hire that drill bit to create a 1/4-inch hole. They have a job they need done in their life.
Right, and JTBD forces you to look past just the functional need, the whole, and analyze the emotional and social needs that are also driving the decision.
So, for instance, someone might hire management software not just for efficiency, the functional job,
But also maybe because they want to feel competent in front of their boss. That's an emotional job.
or maybe be seen as a leader in their department, a social job. JTBD gives you a methodology to actually map these factors rigorously.
Which is worlds away from the vague internal assumptions of the Bob persona exercise.
Exactly. So these superior frameworks, SDT, values hierarchy mapping, JTBD, they're built on concrete tools, measurable data, observable behavior. It proves that rigorous structure is actually far more effective and, ironically, more reliably predictive than vague self-alignment.
So if the goal is really business success, maybe we need to focus less on all the internal identity navel-gazing.
And more on the massive external forces that were likely the real drivers of Kern's reported success back then. We need to identify those external levers.
Right, let's talk about the spectacle. Because you can't deny the sheer magnitude of Kern's claimed financial success is precisely what validated the congruence framework for so many people in the market.
We absolutely have to acknowledge the scale of those claimed results. That 2005-2008 period was wild.
The sources cite these specific headline-grabbing figures, don't they? Like the mass control launch, allegedly $23.8 million in 24 hours.
24 hours. And the serializer system, supposedly $1 million from just 100 customers.
Tiny customer base for that return. And his total personal income post-framework implementation reported around $1.5 million. I mean, these numbers are just phenomenal.
And they provided the ultimate social proof. Right. Irresistible.
So the natural assumption, and certainly the one the framework heavily encourages you to make, is that these results were caused purely by Kern's amazing internal alignment. His subconscious resonance was just off the charts.
Okay, so our job now, acting as the immune system for the mind, is to look for the external, the measurable, the environmental factors, the things that provided the necessary conditions for this kind of success, completely irrespective of his internal congruent state.
First, you just cannot ignore the crucial market conditions at that time.
The 2005 to 2008 period, what was so special about it for internet marketing?
Well, it was a unique, highly specific phase. You could call it the gold rush maturity phase.
Meaning?
The technology for doing mass digital sales, automated funnels, all that was pretty stable by then, but the market itself, still relatively low saturation compared to now.
Right. So it was an era where if you had the technical expertise and you combined it with novelty messaging,
you could get truly outsized results. The audience was hungry, it was concentrated, and frankly, much less skeptical than audiences are today. That environment just amplified the results of any effective strategy massively.
Okay, market timing. What else?
You also have to heavily weigh Kern's authority. He didn't just appear out of thin air in 2005 with this idea.
No, he had a history before that.
Exactly. His prior success history, his existing reputation within that small but really powerful internet marketing industry niche, his positioning meant he commanded immediate trust from a core group.
So when he presented this new congruence framework, it wasn't landing on cold ground.
Not at all. He landed on fertile ground, populated by followers who were already conditioned to trust his methods and buy his products. The framework wasn't built on a blank slate. It was built on pre-existing, hard-won authority.
Makes sense. Market conditions, existing authority. What else drove those huge launch numbers?
Maybe the single biggest external driver, particularly for those astronomical figures like the mass control launch, was the community dynamics of that specific era. Internet marketing back then was a really tight-knit, very collaborative ecosystem. It was dominated by joint ventures, affiliate networks.
Right, the guru network effect.
Precisely. Massive launches like mass control leveraged these networks incredibly effectively. When an established authority figure like Kern released a big product,
thousands of other trusted affiliates would promote it hard to their own audiences who are already warmed up.
Exactly. That's a massive, conscious, coordinated social and network effect. It's entirely separate from any mystical unconscious resonance. You could literally trace the affiliate commissions. You can't trace subconscious alignment.
So the network effect leveraging other people's audiences is often the real engine driving the millions.
While the core identity congruence provides the beautiful, self-congratulatory story to explain it all.
Okay, and there's one more factor. The timing of the methodology itself relative to the industry climate.
Yes, the methodology timing. This is critical context. Remember that period, 2005, 2008? It came after some significant crackdowns by the FTC.
Right, and overly aggressive, high-pressure, sometimes ethically dubious sales tactics that were common in internet marketing before that?
Exactly. So the industry desperately needed a new narrative, something cleaner, softer, more ethical sounding, I guess, a new mechanism for selling those high-priced digital courses.
And the focus on authenticity, effortless attraction, internal congruence.
It provided the perfect philosophical shield and a great narrative mechanism for rebuilding credibility in that post-FTC settlement era.
So the congruence framework might have served as an excellent commercially viable justification for success.
Success that was already primed and enabled by specific market maturity, his personal authority, and those powerful network dynamics.
Okay, and all of this leads us to the grim reality of transferability limitations. If the method itself was the magic bullet, why didn't every single person who bought the course achieve $23.8 million, or even a fraction of that?
Because the methodology, as practiced by Kern, was inherently tied to those external, non-replicable factors we just discussed.
For starters, it has a high personality dependence, right?
Absolutely. It relied heavily on Kern's specific charisma, his communication style, his unique historical position within that very specific niche. What works for a charismatic authority figure with a huge established network, you just can't transpose that onto a generic, unknown practitioner starting from scratch.
And it was also highly market specificity dependent, wasn't it?
Totally. That highly responsive early adopter internet marketing community is, well, it's distinct. Try applying the language of subconscious resonance to, I don't know, selling advanced B2B logistics software or running a manufacturing plant.
The gap between the philosophical language and the practical application would become pretty obvious pretty quickly.
And finally, the era context has fundamentally shifted.
We live in a different world now.
Completely. Today, we exist in this post-social media saturation environment. Audiences are fragmented, they're hyper-skeptical, they're bombarded with information constantly. The techniques that created a sudden massive explosion back in 2007, they just can't generate the same kind of results today. That gold rush window is closed.
And the whole system relies so much on subjective, intuitive understanding, doesn't it? That feeling of rightness.
Which is exactly the kind of thing that fundamentally resists systematic, scalable protocols. The kind of modern, sustainable business actually needs.
Okay, so we have spent considerable time now dismantling the illusion, exposing the gaps, questioning the evidence.
Ripped it apart pretty thoroughly.
Now, let's fulfill the ultimate purpose of this deep dive. Let's try and rebuild the system, but using the scientific rigor we found so lacking in the original.
All right, moving from self-help fantasy to psychological engineering. The goal here is to replace the illusion with actual metrics. Build an empirical foundation replacement.
And the single most crucial pivot point in doing that?
It's this. We replace the untestable, mystical concept of the core identity.
Gone.
With a measurable, observable values hierarchy.
Okay, explain that. How do we measure values?
We can use established tools from psychology and market research. Things like values card sorting exercises or the rigorous psychological technique known as values laddering.
Which lets you map what a person or even a customer segment truly cares about, but in a quantifiable, verifiable way.
Exactly. It shifts the focus entirely. You're not finding your inner self in some vague way. You're aligning your actions with measurable criteria that represent values.
And critically, we need to ground this new influence pathway in the verifiable mechanisms of human motivation.
Right. So instead of aiming for some vague resonance,
we specifically target the drivers defined by self-determination theory, SDT, that we mentioned earlier.
Autonomy, competence, relatedness.
Exactly. We focus on how our communication, our product delivery, how it actually fulfills the customer's real psychological needs for autonomy. Do they feel they're choosing freely? Competence, do they feel they're mastering something? And relatedness, do they feel connected?
Because these are real levers of influence, not just philosophical concepts.
And to make this system work, to make it actionable and self-correcting, it demands rigorous behavioral metrics.
Meaning?
We have to establish measurable indicators of effectiveness. We stop asking, did you feel congruent today?
And start asking,
did our A/B test conversion rates increase when we framed the message this way? Did this specific message drive traceable engagement behavior, clicks, shares, comments? The outcome has to be tied to observable action.
Okay, so our source material actually lays out a methodical 4-phase methodological renovation, a kind of empirical influence pathway that moves logically from measurable introspection to external validation.
Let's walk through it. Phase 1, self-assessment.
Right. We keep the value of internal exploration, but we apply concrete standardized tools. This is where we ditch the 4-hour creative writing exercise.
And replace it with?
Measurable tasks. Using established psychological tools like values card sorting exercises. You literally rank a fixed list of values, security, creativity, connection, whatever, to create your own quantifiable hierarchy.
Okay.
We could also employ things like motivational structure mapping to pinpoint where your current behavior doesn't align with your stated core values. This lets you conduct a measurable congruence gap analysis.
So this analysis gives you a non-mystical roadmap for genuine alignment. It tells you where your actions are off from your stated values.
Precisely. So you can fix behavioral inconsistencies rather than just vaguely claiming you have insufficient internal purity. It's practical.
Okay, phase 1 is measurable self-assessment. What's phase 2? Market understanding.
This is where we completely and scientifically replace the imaginary BA persona. We move beyond assumption through rigorous objective research.
So actually talking to real customers.
Imagine that. Yes. This requires things like ethnographic customer research, actually observing customers in their natural environment, doing detailed jobs-to-be-done interviews.
And performing values laddering with actual customers to understand the deeper emotional, social, functional needs driving their decisions.
Yes. This is a fundamental strategic shift. Instead of trying to align your mystical core self with your imaginary customer's equally mystical core self.
You're aligning your validated value proposition with your quantifiable customer needs.
Exactly. The effort is now directed outward, toward market reality based on data.
Makes sense. Okay, phase 1, self-assessment, measured. Phase 2, market understanding, real data. What's phase 3? Communication design.
Now we translate the data we gathered in phase 2 into highly targeted and crucially testable communication.
How?
This means creating values-based message framing, crafting narratives, sales copy, content that explicitly speaks to the customer's measured, hierarchy-ranked values. For example, leading with autonomy, if your research shows that ranks highest for them. We can still integrate authentic storytelling, but it should be storytelling that validates the customer's experience and values, not just showcasing your own personal transformation story.
And then we test it.
Rigorously.
Yeah.
Multi-channel resonance testing. Does the message framing optimized for autonomy perform better than the one optimized for competence? Does it differ between email and video? We don't guess based on a feeling.
We test its actual behavioral impact across specific platforms using proper A/B methods.
Exactly. Which leads directly into phase 4, measurement and optimization.
This sounds like the crucial step that enforces rigor and finally closes that circular logic loop we talked about.
It is. This phase requires persistent, granular A/B testing of value propositions. You empirically see which message framing drives higher conversions and, ideally, understand why.
And tracking detailed engagement metrics, not just vanity clicks, but things like time spent, scroll depth, quality of interaction.
All of that. And most importantly, performing conversion correlation analysis. You need to be able to link a specific values-based message back to a verifiable business outcome.
So the statement becomes something like, our data proves that aligning message A, which validates customer value B, say competence, drives conversion rate C among our target demographic.
Exactly. It's robust, it's self-correcting, it's potentially scalable, it moves the practitioner off the shaky ground of, I feel authentic, therefore I must be succeeding.
To the solid foundation of our scientific method, rooted in values alignment and validated by data, proves this message works.
And the real power of replacing the illusion with actual science is that this new rebuilt system can seamlessly integrate with other cutting-edge scientific fields. We can even look ahead at some powerful future integration opportunities.
Okay, like what? Where else could this connect?
Well, you could connect this values-based, metric-driven system directly to behavioral economics.
Using things like choice architecture, framing effects, anchoring.
Exactly, to ethically guide customer decisions based on known cognitive biases, leading to more predictable influence outcomes. Still rooted in understanding the customer, but using established science.
What about neuroscience? You mentioned subconscious telepathy earlier.
Right, we can move beyond that vague stuff into real neurological science. This rebuilt system could integrate with current neuroscience research, particularly around the mirror neuron system and empathy mechanism.
Mirror neurons. The biological basis for empathy, they fire when we watch someone else act.
Yeah, creating an internal simulation. By communicating with verifiable authenticity and alignment based on data, now we likely engage the mirror neuron system more effectively. This creates genuine biological connection and trust.
Which is far more real than relying on philosophical subconscious telepathy.
Definitely. And finally, you could even use complex systems analysis
How would that apply?
to study the emergent properties of authentic networks. When a company genuinely aligns its measurable values and communicates them consistently, the resulting network affects the social amplification. The trust that builds become powerful and, crucially, more predictable over time.
Which is far superior to relying on a single individual's possibly fleeting charisma or a lucky market moment.
So at the end of the day, we've successfully replaced the essentialist, untestable idea of a core identity.
With the operationalizable, measurable structure of a values hierarchy.
We've traded the seductive, mystical promise of effortless results
For the repeatable, measurable process of empirical influence.
We've replaced the self-sealing circular logic
With rigorous, falsifiable methods. Providing a path to influence that isn't just effective, but transparent and learnable.
And that, ultimately, is the huge difference between a high-priced illusion designed to sell you certainty
And a sustainable, proven business strategy built on actual psychological reality.
And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. Where will you spot this same pattern of mystical solutions wrapped in business language in the next self-help guru, marketing course, or leadership seminar you encounter? Once you recognize the architecture of these mental cathedrals, you'll see them everywhere.
Let us know in the comments.
Question the narrative.
Deconstruct the dogma.
See the system.
We'll see you next time.
Stay skeptical.